Hey there, subscribe to my channel, and also press this bell icon so you never miss any new updates, cause whenever we upload new video you will get a notification on your phone.
You have 30 seconds to look at questions 1 to 3.
Hello, accommodation department. How can I help you?
Do you look after accommodation for international students?
Yes, we look after accommodation for all the students.
Good. I hope you can help me then. I've only just been accepted onto a postgraduate course, and I want to know if there is any accommodation available from this September. I know it's very short notice.
Yes, it is rather late, but I'm sure we'll be able to find you something. First of all, can you give me your name and student number so that I can find you on the system?
Sure. My name is Maria Teresa Gonzalez.
Maria Teresa Gonzalez. How do you spell that?
Gonzalez.
Thank you. Got it. And your student number, please?
SHU 300715PG.
SHU 300715PG. Ah, here you are. Department of Modern Languages.
Yes, that's me.
You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 4 to 7.
Okay, now there are several options for postgraduate students. Firstly, there is the Trigon. This is a new block near to the station and not far from the main campus. Accommodation is what we call cluster accommodation.
What does that mean?
There's a small group of rooms, usually 6, each with its own bathroom clustered around a lounge kitchen area which is shared.
Oh, I see. That sounds good.
They are very popular. The price for these is £99 per week, and we do have some availability left. However, for postgraduate students, there are other options.
And what are they?
There's another apartment block called The Cube, located near the west gate of the campus. Accommodation there is in 1 or 2 bedroom self-contained flats.
So, the cube is self-contained? How does that work?
Well, basically, they're just like ordinary apartments. Each apartment has 1 or 2 study bedrooms with ensuite bathroom, a lounge and a kitchen.
And what is the price of those?
For the 1 bedroom, it is £180 per week, and for the 2 bedroom, it is £110 per week for each person.
And can I choose who I share with?
If you have a friend and you would like to share with them, of course, we can reserve a 2-bedroom apartment for you both. Otherwise, you just have to share with whoever else is there. Obviously, it will be another woman.
I will have to think about this. Do I have to make a decision now?
No, but we don't have much accommodation left, so I can't guarantee that there will still be availability if you leave it too long.
Yes, that's fair. I have a friend in the management department who might like to share. I will speak with her and get back to you this afternoon.
Okay, fine. Do let us know as soon as you can.
I will do. Thanks for all your help.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 2.
Part 2.
You'll hear a lecturer talking to students about the ozone layer and CFCs.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 17. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 17.
Today, it is well known that CFCs, or chlorofluorocarbons, can do immense damage to the ozone layer, which protects the Earth from harmful radiation from the Sun. However, it was as recently as the mid-1970s when the connection between CFCs and ozone layer destruction was first established. The story starts back in 1957, when James Lovelock invented the electron capture detector. This is a machine that can detect very small amounts of a chemical compound in the atmosphere. Indeed, using the machine, it was Lovelock who was the first person to detect the widespread presence of CFCs in the Earth's atmosphere. In 1973, Lovelock, on a research trip which he'd funded himself, measured the amount of CFCs in the atmosphere in the Arctic and in Antarctica, but unfortunately came to the wrong conclusion that CFCs are not harmful to the environment. Following on from this work, though, in 1974, Sherry Rowland and Mario Molina published the very first scientific paper on the connection between CFCs and ozone depletion. This quickly prompted the world's first ban on the use of CFCs, which was enacted in 1975 by the US state of Oregon. Further bans followed. In 1978, the United States and several European countries banned the use of CFCs in spray cans. CFCs were still allowed to be used, though, for refrigeration and in solvents. It was in the mid-1980s that scientists in Antarctica observed a huge depletion in the ozone layer above them, often called the hole in the ozone layer. This led, in 1987, to the signing of the Montreal Protocol, which called for further reductions in the production and use of CFCs, and then, 2 years later, to a European Union agreement to ban the production of all CFCs by the end of the century.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 18 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 18 to 20.
So why exactly are CFCs so harmful? One of the reasons CFCs were so popular in the production of solvents and refrigeration coolants is that they are unreactive. That is, they don't react easily or at all with other chemical compounds. It's this property, however, that also makes them dangerous. Because they are unreactive, it's very difficult for them to be broken down. This gives them a long lifespan, more than 100 years in some cases, and allows them to rise into the upper levels of the atmosphere, the stratosphere, unchanged. There, ultraviolet radiation from the sun starts to break them down, freeing the chlorine atoms from the CFCs. It's this chlorine that helps destroy the ozone there.
That is the end of Part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear a student, Alex, asking his tutor for advice about essay writing. You now have 30 seconds to read questions 21 to 27.
Hi, Alex. Come in. I gather you wanted some help with writing essays.
Yes, I'm finding this first term difficult, and I'm worried about the assignments we have to do for January.
Well, let me see if I can help. You shouldn't panic about it, because essay writing is a very straightforward process, really. What it involves is organising the information that you want to include. You shouldn't have more than you can easily manage within the word count. Make sure you haven't got too much or anything irrelevant. You need to look at that and work out what you need and what you don't need before you start. And then you just have to think about how you're going to put forward your argument.
Oh, that sounds very straightforward when you put it like that. But I'm worried I haven't got the necessary skills for writing an effective essay because English is my second language.
Well, perhaps you misunderstand the skills you need. You need to be able to analyse your data, and then I would say the skills of interpretation and expressing yourself are important. Perhaps it's this last one that bothers you, but the more essays you write, the more you will develop these skills.
Yes, and I don't quite know how to improve at that. Though, as you say, I know practice will help. And I need to make sure I've got everything ready before I start.
Yes. What is vital to good essay writing is preparation. So make sure you build in enough time to do the research you need.
Are there any other sources I can use to help me with essays?
Yes. You should go to the library and look through the reference section, because there are books that focus on the style we use in academic writing, and those will help you a lot. The other thing that you should think about is what happens when you've actually written your essay. Too many students just complete their work and hand it in, whereas what you should be doing is making sure that you edit it as thoroughly as possible.
Oh, yes, that's a good idea. Then I'd pick up any mistakes and also see if it reads logically.
Exactly. The other thing is, again, what a lot of students do is get their essays back, look at the marks, then just file it away. They don't realise that if they checked it through and looked at what the tutor had written, then they can learn from their old essays.
Yeah, I can see that's a good idea.
So, is that okay? You can always come back to me.
You now have 15 seconds to read questions 28 to 30.
Actually, there were a couple of other things I wanted to ask you about essay writing. I had a few thoughts of my own about what I should do, such as really taking good notes when I'm reading, Because that helps, doesn't it?
I think it improves your knowledge rather than your actual writing. But one tip I can give you is to try and not read too much. Otherwise, you end up including irrelevant material in your essay. Remember to stay on task.
Yes. Sometimes I have problems interpreting the questions correctly. Or the whole question seems overwhelming to me. What I try to do is highlight the key parts and divide it into smaller chunks so I can manage it.
Well, you might find it useful to break it down even further by making sure you understand all the words perfectly before you start. Things like assess or comment and such like.
Yes, I see.
Sometimes, after an objective analysis, the question actually asks you for a subjective opinion. But you must remember to support your arguments if that's the case. One final comment I can make is about using your own words. You must try to do this as far as possible. You're expected to summarise what you've read, not just string together a list of quotations. In fact, you shouldn't have too many. Just use them where it's really important.
Okay, thanks.
Do you read other students' essays when you've finished?
No. Why? Is that a good idea?
Well, you can confuse each other, so I'd advise against it. But it's up to you.
Okay. Thanks very much for your time.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Cheese is one of those foods that we tend to take for granted as always having been with us. And it's odd to think that someone somewhere must have discovered the process to make cheeses. That takes place today. In the studio to tell us all about it is Monica Maxwell.
Today, we all know that the process of making cheeses takes place when microorganisms get into milk and bring about changes in its physical and biochemical structure. Well, obviously, we don't know who discovered the process, but it's thought that it came from Southwest Asia about 8,000 years ago. In the early time, there were mainly two types of cheeses. One of them was rather tasteless and bland in the case of the so-called fresh cheeses, which are eaten immediately after the milk has coagulated. And another one was rough-tasting and salty in the case of the ripened cheeses, which are made by adding salt to the soft fresh cheese and allowing other biochemical processes to continue so that a stronger taste and a more solid texture resulted. The ancient Romans changed all that. They were great pioneers in the art of cheese-making, and the different varieties of cheese they invented and the techniques for producing them spread with them to the countries they invaded. This spread of new techniques took place between about 60 BC and 300 AD. You can still trace their influence in the English word cheese, which comes ultimately from the Latin word Caseus, that's C-A-S-E-U-S. At this stage in history, people weren't aware in a scientific way of the role of different microorganisms and enzymes in producing different types of cheese, but they knew from experience that cheese's tastes were relevant to something. If you kept your milk or your pre-cheese mixture at a certain temperature or in a certain environment, Things would turn out in a certain way. In the 19th century, with the increasing knowledge about microorganism, there came the next great step forward in cheese making. Once it was known exactly which microorganism was involved in the different stages of producing a cheese, and how the presence of different microorganisms affected the taste, it was possible to introduce them deliberately and to industrialize the process. Nowadays, cheese is made on a large scale in factories, although the small producer working from his dairy farm continued to exist and still exists today. Cheesemaking moved very much into the world of technology and industrial processes, although because the aim is still to produce something that people like to eat, there's still an important role for human judgment. People still go round tasting the young cheese at different stages to see how it's getting on, and may add a bit of this or that to improve the final taste. Whatever the scale of production, there is still room for the development of art alongside the technology.
That is the end of part 4.